Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. April's coming. April is coming. So, what do you need to know about April? Well, as I've done with all the past previous months, I think people have liked this, so let's do it again. Games that I think need to be on your radar from Kickstarter that are going to be launching in April. As always, no particular order, no particular preference, just games of note. Games that may make your wallet weep. Now, since the delay of Mythic Battles Ragnarok was announced from March 23 to April 5, I'm going to sort of cheat with this one, and we're going to say sort of the honorable mention is Mythic Battles Ragnarok, because that is a giant that I can't imagine that a lot of the other games that were launching or planning on launching in April were hoping to go up against and hoping to time that it would be done by the time they launched. And with this delay, how does that shift the landscape? Are other campaigns going to adjust accordingly, or are they just going to say, you know what, this is just what we got to do, this is just where we're at, this is just what we're going to end up doing no matter what? So here you can see, as I just referred to, Kickstarter being postponed, April 5, Monday. Interesting. The other side of things is prototypes are on the way to your favorite reviewers. I wish I could say I was one of those. I mean, at this point, there's not probably a whole lot else to say. The Mythic Battles legacy, I think we're going to see whether or not it holds up. It's got a lot of hype behind it just by the nature of what it is and by the fact that it's a miniatures game. And so the combination of those two is going to be very telling. And I'm assuming that all of the other big channels, Board Game Co., Quackalope, Dice Tower, are all going to be getting copies when they say your favorite reviewers. I expect to see some videos there. Apart from that, we'll see. I still think there's a good question of what they're going to offer in terms of the content, what the all-in price is going to be. It was going to be on my April credit card bill anyway at this point. Now, depending on how long the campaign is, maybe it'll be on my May credit card bill. So maybe that's a good thing for all of us, that we can spread it out a little bit more evenly, because there's a couple other things that always pop up as well that are probably going to sap some of those funds away anyway. It's a skirmish game. It's got a great foundation to stand on. From everything that's shown in terms of what's out there, the maps, the characters, the monsters that they've previewed, it's gonna be good. It's just how good and is it for you? And I wonder how critical some of the reviewers are going to be. That would be the only other question is, are these going to be previews? Are these going to actually be reviews? So we'll get a little bit better idea of that when it comes out. And the other big question, I think, is how cross-compatible, how easy, upgrades, modifications, what is going to be necessary for that? Or is it just going to be straight up, you play one with the other? I think the other side of that coin as well is just a balance issue. Is this game going to have some power creep? Or is it just going to be really balanced? Are you going to see 6 months or a year from now, when you sort of mash your Pantheon and Ragnarok together, Ragnarok is overwhelmingly a little bit stronger? That would be a big fear of mine as well. As someone who has almost all of Pantheon and is looking at getting a significant portion of Ragnarok. Like I said before, this is not a question of need. I don't need any more Mythic Battles, period. But how much of this am I going to end up with is more of the question as well. So, and I think a lot of that, again, depends on the price point. It depends on the value. It depends on the exclusivity. And it depends on just how it's rolled out. So we'll see when it launches now on April 5. So next up, obviously, I'm going to have to talk about it. And again, sort of like the last game that they put out, the initial early impressions based on what they're revealing, and they are revealing more now than they have ever. They revealed a lot of information about their previous game, Bardsung, before it came to Kickstarter. However, I think just like I just mentioned with Monolith is sending prototypes to reviewers. They really didn't do that before with the first one. Steamforged Games did not do that with Bardsung. Will we see it with Monster Hunter World, the board game? Which, by the way, is launching on, or stomping, on a Kickstarter on the 20th. They are progressively showing more. There may be the progressive realization like Monolith had that, you know what, if we want to get more eyes, we need to have more outlets and more content. Steamforged Games has not been very open to doing that. up until this point. That, in combined with their track record, which is kind of a bit hit or miss. Dark Souls is not overall highly thought of. Horizon Zero Dawn, again, is not being panned as a great game just by the core alone, at least at this point. The Resident Evils have a mostly positive spin to them. And the Devil May Cry game has been, for the most part, well received as well. Bardsung, as well as this, are going to be more of a true litmus test. Have they improved? Have they dealt with some of the design issues in the past? But also, like several of those other games I just mentioned, how much issue is there going to be in design? Because a lot of people are expecting this to be very true to the game. That was a huge criticism on the Primal the Awakening side of things. People looked at it and said, this is trying to be Monster Hunter, and it's not, and I don't like it. Well, kinda taken the aspect of hunting monsters, but it wasn't trying to make it into Monster Hunter the board game, and that's what a lot of people assumed. They went in there and looked at it assuming this is supposed to be like, well, it wasn't. This is supposed to be it. And so there's more eyes on it from that side of things. Now, the other interesting thing is, the comparison I will use here is The Witcher, the Old World, which is coming in May. This pre-launch page has a very good, respectable 4,500 followers currently. Have clicked and said, including me, tell me when this launches. The Witcher, on the other hand, has 22, almost 23,000. And I'm not sure that you can make an argument that The Witcher is 4 to 5 times a bigger intellectual property than Monster Hunter. And Go On Board only has 2 other Kickstarter games to their credit, Titans and Valhalla, the most of which had just under 3,000 backers. So is that lack of exposure? Is that lack of hype? Is that just people being a little bit more cautious from Steamforged Games? And let me be clear. I am willing to give people another shot. I mean, I think I did that with Bardsung. I went into that with a clean slate saying, okay, Steamforged, impress me. I put out some videos overviewing what we knew, what the mechanics were going to be, and what it was like. And when it launched, we got a little bit further look at the rules and some of the gameplay and some of that. It was too D&D-esque for me, even though I think they did some very unique and creative things. Now, the question is going to be, that was also their own intellectual property. That was not somebody else's property that they were using, having to get parts of it approved, parts of the mechanics okayed by outside parties, not to mention all of the art and everything else. And I just can't help but wonder, is that going to be an influence in a positive or a negative way? I don't know. Like I said, though, they have been more upfront, more open. There are something like 8 designer diaries going through various aspects of the game so far regarding this game. You can see here the scale of the miniatures. They are going big, literally and figuratively. They have also, even 2 months ago, put out pledge levels. So you can see what the pledge levels are going to be. Because this, on the opposite side, again, to compare to Primal, because that's where most of the comparisons are going to be made, for better and for worse. Even though, gameplay-wise, I think they are drastically different. Thematically, miniature-wise, they are very similar. I think your comparisons are going to be better like Dark Souls and several other games from a miniature standpoint that use their system, or that are similar in that way. But the criticism of Primal was the barrier to entry. However, Primal also was upfront about sort of the all-in. Steamforged has never done that. Steamforged has taken the Awakened Realms and the CMON approach of slowly trickling out expansion after gameplay expansion after non-gameplay expansion throughout the campaign to keep the hype up. And so here you can see what you're getting. $70, 4 monsters, 4 hunters. Honestly, I hate that because this makes it sound like it's incomplete. Core pledge, you're getting double that. And you're paying literally double that. You're giving me double stuff, I'm paying exactly double. If you're not going to make stuff exclusive, which, knowing Steamforged, they will, give me at least a little bit of a discount at the higher levels. And I'm sure they will with the all-ins. Then, here you have the all-in pledge. The question is, and I don't know the answer to this, and I want to be fair to them. Is this actually an all-in? The monster count from 140 to 280, again, price doubling. The monster count does not double, folks. It does not go from 4 to 8 to 16. You have 12 monsters. So you're getting 4 additional monsters for $140. You're getting more hunters. You're getting 8 hunters. You're getting 12 hunters. Again, the 8 to 12, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. How many hunters do I actually need? They've already shown through some of the blogs 4 of the core hunters and what weapons they're going to be. And you can see them down here at the bottom here. The bow, the dual blades, the great sword, and the sword and shield. At least I'm assuming that's what those 4 are there at the bottom. The question would be, my fear with this, because you see all the unlocks listed here, plus all unlocks, although you're not getting unlocks at this lower level. So this pledge level, without having those unlocks, I don't even know why it's offered on the Kickstarter. It's sort of like Euros that offer the retail version. Like, really? Unless your country isn't going to be getting the game, and then I hear you. But unless you're in the majority then, this pledge level makes absolutely no sense. Except if this is just the basic one that you're going to be selling at retail. You might as well change the entry level to retail level. Because that's really what it is. You're going to have strong guesses that these unlocks are going to be exclusive. And that's where the value is going to come in. But,
Loki, knock it off, buddy.
Are they going to gate some of the unlocks behind the pledge levels? Because you see that there's only 2 cores here in terms of boxes, right? Well, look at here. There's 6 even. And are they going to add stretch goals just as a stretch goal box? Or are they going to individually stretch goal some of these boxes? Say what you will about Mythic Battles Ragnarok, they just gave you a whole bunch of extra stuff. And I'm assuming that Ragnarok is going to be the same. My fear is that these unlocks are going to be gated behind these individual ones. And now I have no justification for that, but we have seen other companies do it. We have seen CMON do it. And like I said, they've sort of adopted a little bit of the CMON model. So would I be surprised if they did that? No. Do I hope they do it? No. But we'll see. When this gets closer, I'm probably going to put out a video about what we actually know. A little bit of an overview, sort of like I did with Bardsong prior to the campaign. Because I think people like hearing and seeing rather than just reading. And they've done a good job with putting out the blog information. And from what I've seen in terms of how the monsters work and how you're going to be interacting on the nodes, it's clever. And it's relatively intuitive on the cards, even though the design initially is a little bit unusual. But the proof is going to be in the pudding. I want to see some gameplay. I want to see a rule book. Steamforge, send me a copy. No, I actually sent them emails asking to get on their list. But this is a game that I think is going to get a lot of scrutiny. I'm going to give it a lot of scrutiny. But I am also not going to say, based on their past history, that they can't make improvements, because they've shown that they can. But is it going to be enough to entice me and want me to spend pretty much as much money as I did with Primal? And that is the big I don't know yet at this point. So we'll see. Interestingly enough, next up, you may recognize this. It's a Wonderful World. Previously on Kickstarter for the base game, as well with the expansion that funded additionally. And if you're not familiar with It's a Wonderful World, it's a card drafting, engine building, resource management style of game. Like I mentioned, expansions are out, there's a campaign mode, and it's relatively well thought of. A 7.9, 166th overall right now on Board Game Geek. So it is really looked at as a very solid game. So why am I talking about it? I'm talking about it because It's a Wonderful Kingdom happens to also be launching on April 20, the same day as Monster Hunter. This, however, is a little bit different and a little bit of a departure from the aforementioned game. This is a 1 to 2 player game where you are, as you may guess, building your kingdom. They're marketing this as taking the core of what made It's a Wonderful World great and twisting it and modifying it, adding more interaction, adding more bluffing, adding more challenges, adding modularity so that you can play head to head each time with a different twist. It gives me more of a Res Arcana vibe, if you will. And you'll understand that a little bit more when I explain how the game is actually played. 4 rounds, 3 phases. So also not a very long game. It is using the highly underrated, underused mechanic in the first phase of I cut, you choose. where you take 2 cards from your hand and you choose either you place 2 on one pile or 1 on each pile. Then the other person chooses a pile to take. Now then you rinse and repeat with all the cards in your hand. They also mentioned something along the lines of trap cards, which can be played as face down cards as well in this phase. Phase 2, then taking said cards that you have acquired and choosing which ones to try and build, which ones to try and recycle for resources. And by the way, they call this phase planification. I love it. And then the third phase is producing said resources so that you can plan ahead and be able to develop further along the lines for subsequent rounds. That's it. Do that 4 times, most points, end of game, game over. Now, I'd wonder, because it is being marketed and playing at a 1 to 2 person player count, how will that affect the funds raised? Because although these games are well thought of and there is a significant niche for them, I think the niche overall, you could make a very good case for, I don't think there's any argument, that it is a smaller niche. The solo and even 2-player only games. Not a game that you can play at 2 players, but a 2-player or less, period. Now they have said that since this is a different game, the previous versions, the Kickstarter versions of It's a Wonderful World and the expansion are not going to be offered. So if that is your reason to look at this, you're going to have to look elsewhere. But this is a different take on what they've put out there, and let's see how it's received. Because I think it's appealing even to someone like myself as a 2-player game to play with my wife. Something that is quick, with meaningful decisions, but not significant overhead, nor significant analysis paralysis. With an engine that has already proven to be more than relatively successful. So we'll see when it launches on the 20th. Okay, so what else is in April? I've been talking about it. I've been thinking about it. I've been hyping it. I got some contact, but not a whole lot of confirmation for anything. But I feel like, personally, I'm going to talk about it because I think Marvel United X-Men, the sequel, standalone expansion, compatible with the first one, I think it's going to be launching in April. So let's talk about it here. So the question just is, what do you need to know? Marvel United by CMON, it funded back in March of 2020. There was a little bit of controversy around it when it was being fulfilled because they went to retail with a core box, which had some exclusives for retail. Target, Walmart each had one. I think like Ant-Man or Wasp, I forget which one, and then Venom on the other side. And that kind of cheesed people off. But ultimately, for the price they paid versus the price you paid on Kickstarter, all the extra stuff you're getting, it didn't really bother me. Now, it is in the process of being fulfilled. 21,000 backers, nearly $3 million, 2.8 if we're being exact. It took a lot of criticism because there wasn't a lot of information about the game before it came to Kickstarter. And a lot of people looked at it from a chibi side of things and from a, this is too simple of a family style light card game, cooperative, blah, 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 blah. And then the retail version hit. And then people said, you know what? This is better than I thought it was going to be. It was relatively straightforward and simpler, like people had said. But then people realized that, okay, this has the potential if you have, oh, look, all of these different expansions right here along with the pledge. And so now you see people clamoring for it as it is being fulfilled. This 190 pledge going for somewhere between 400 and 500 on the secondary market. Zombicide, Undead or Alive, ended about 3 weeks ago. The previous CMON pattern was they would do something every 6 weeks to 2 months. So I am going to guess it's either going to be at the end of April or the beginning of May. But that's why I'm going to talk about it now, because I could see them trying to sneak it in at the end of April. There's so much other MCU stuff going on in the pop culture scene right now. This would be the time to strike when the iron is hot. Stuff is coming out. Quackalope appears to have some sort of relationship as he's done videos for their past couple campaigns. Dice Tower did a live playthrough earlier in the week that they streamed that 13,000 people have watched. And that they revealed some of the new stuff that's going to be going along with this game. When you put out a thing like this, coming soon to Kickstarter, again, that plays heavily that I think it's going to be coming. And I'd say, based on the reception that the first series is getting right now, and you can make a good argument that people overlooked it and downplayed just how fun it was going to be. that it underachieved, especially when you think about it in terms of a Marvel IP. That's underachieving with 21,000 people, mind you. Now, they've also just put out, a couple days ago, Developer's Diary #1. They're taking probably one of the most iconic franchises in nerd pop culture history that has never really received its due diligence outside of the comic books, and then translating it into the tabletop. Because you can make a good argument that there is not another good tabletop game. There is not even a movie, barely a couple shows, and hopefully make it just all that more successful. And I could see this raising twice the number of the first one. Twice. I'll put that bold prediction out there because people have seen the potential. Now with CMON though, you don't know what's going to happen, because I think a lot of people would clamor for being able to buy the previous edition's Kickstarter stuff during the second campaign, but they don't tend to do that. And I would be shocked if they did it on this one. Now, one thing they talk about in this developer diary, but also on the playthrough, is they said, right here, you can't add a fifth player very easily by the way the game plays. But you can do a one versus all, with the one being the villain. Does that sound good to you? That sounds freaking fantastic to me. Some of my favorite games are 1v-alls. Rise of Moloch, the others, I love both of those games. One is much more tactical, one is much more strategic, but they are very much both shoot 'em up dungeon crawls with a lot of fun overhead. They also talk about anti-heroes, like, say, Magneto, where he has a hero deck, but also a villain deck. Because if you know anything about the comics history, he is exactly just that. They also make it clear that there will be cross-compatibility between this edition and retrofitting the previous edition to be able to work together. Because there are going to be elements that are going to be added in terms of the mutant powers. I think they say something like up to 4 per character that we did not necessarily see in the previous edition. And that just makes me more excited. I am a big Marvel fan. I am a much bigger X-Men fan. This is also going to be, I think, I'm going to probably try it at some point when I get the courage to do so, to paint this with my 7-year-old. As our first foray into painting whatsoever. It's probably going to be horrible and a mess, and it's going to be great, because he loves superheroes. And he is more artistic than I am. His are probably going to turn out better than mine are. And that just makes me more excited that I could be able to play it with him and paint it with him. So, based on what we know, I think you're going to see a trickle of information start to flow out over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Just the question is going to be the exact timing, and they have not gone too far in advance on previous campaigns to announce the date. 1 to 2 weeks-ish. So expect something similar. So prepare your wallets if this interests you, because you may not have a whole lot of lead time, especially with Everdell just ending, especially with Stellaris going on, with Mythic Battles going to be airing in a couple days. There is a lot to take in and to be aware. Now, you may be wanting to do what I did on this previous campaign. As you can see, I pledged for just the Infinity Pledge. I split my payments up essentially because I upgraded to the Ultimate Pledge in the Pledge Manager. And that is the way I've been doing a lot of these, just to spread the funds out, which works out very nicely. Because say what you want about CMON, but they put out a very solid game. There is a ton of plastic with it. There is a ton of game with it though too now. Argue that what you may. I don't view getting all of these miniatures and expansions any different, and this is going to be somewhat controversial, Robinson Crusoe's Book of Adventures. 50 plus adventures? When are you going to play 55 adventures by the time all the stretch goals are hit? Just like saying, when are you going to use all of the combinations of these heroes? I probably not, but I can. Isn't that why you're buying the Book of Adventures if you're going in with Robinson Crusoe, though? We love the term replayability, but you play the game 5 times until you move on for something else, right? That's the truth of it, for the most part. So that's why I view these equally, and I just get super irritated by people that look at one and say it's okay and look at the other and frown on it. It's just hypocritical, because it's your genre that you prefer versus the one you don't. Plastic versus paper. Do you. Do what makes you happy in that sense if you can afford it. That's what matters more. Apart from that, what do we know? Not much else. Like I said, stuff is going to trickle out. This is going to be good. There's going to have a whole lot more stuff. I hope we see a lot of just crazy characters. CMON, throw me Age of Apocalypse. If you could throw me an expansion with Age of Apocalypse, That would be, above all else, the most amazing thing out there. You know there's going to be a full Phoenix one, right? What else is there going to be? Dig deep into that mythos of X-Men, please, and show us the depths of what you can give us. That would be amazing. This is a cooperative game I think you could very well play with the kids, the family, and the game group, especially if you have some of these expansions that add a lot more nuance, especially if you're looking at the 1v all that's going to come with this version as well. I think it is across the board a game, not just for one element. Now, if this doesn't appeal to you in the first place, the second one's not going to either. Let's be clear. It's not going to change things that dramatically unless somehow the 1v all is your sweet spot that you are blind to when it comes to these games. And most people, that is not the case. But this is probably up there in terms of the games I am most hyped about for the year, with Sengokushin, Mythic Battles Ragnarok, Primal, and this. There's a couple others, but it's right up there for me. That's how hyped I am about this. So will I be getting it all? Yeah, I probably will. There is going to have to be some cataclysmic event to prevent me from probably going all in. So that's just me personally. But that's how excited I am. Do I need it? No. Am I probably going to get it and want it? Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, X-Men over MCU. So if I did all in on this one, you know what's happening in the other one. Simon, go get DC and do it with DC. Do this with DC. And hello, cha-ching! Right? Okay, I've been talking about that enough. You guys get my drift. What else do you need to know? Don't know if you heard about this one either. This one kind of sneaked through things. Hellboy from Mythic. This was a game, a dungeon crawl based on the IP that funded back in May 2018, raising just under $2 million US. Like I said, from Mythic Games. They snuck out at the end of the year, and it's slowly been leaking out since, that there is going to be another Kickstarter for expansions of some sort in the first quarter. See what I did there? Of 2021. So, as we're talking about April, April is the last part of the first third of the year. So, it should have been out probably in March, but it's not, unless it's going to sneak in here at the last day or two. So, this is what we're looking at here. Now, if you're not familiar with it, this is what it is. 120 miniatures, 23 Kickstarter exclusives. It was a dungeon crawl featuring all of your favorite heroes, villains, and everything in between. A little bit of everything. It came with a couple expansions thrown in, very much like Simon's games, in terms of what you were getting, the exclusives, and everything else that you could get along with it, including these other expansions. Very similar. So what have they said about this iconic guy? It is the BPRD files. Time to complete the storyline that they did and started with the first Kickstarter. 3 new sets: Hell on Earth, Pandemonium, and End of Days. New playable agents, new missions to do, as well as new minions and new monsters. Pandemonium even adds new bosses. So a little bit of everything. Now, on the Board Game Geek forums, they talk about the fact that they have said that there might not be a core box available, similarly from the first Kickstarter. So then, is this going to be a little standalone? If this is campaignish, is it only going to be that way? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's not a lot of detail, like I said. And it says here, you're facing Nimue in her dragon form. Let me be clear. I'm talking about it not just because it's a huge IP, but because it overall is very also well thought of. You don't get an 8.0 rating without being relatively good, especially with the amount of scrutiny that IPs like this undergo in the first place when they're put out, especially by fans, but especially by those looking for a dungeon crawl and that have played other dungeon crawlers. Is it the best one out there? Probably not. I haven't played it personally. I know a lot of people look at other ones first when they recommend things. But is it solid? Yeah, I've heard very solid recommendations for it. So the big question is, does it solve some of the critiques of the first one? Does it make more a good thing in this case? Or does it just do more? And then, like I said, what else is going to be offered? That's the thing with these Kickstarter sequel expansions, is how much of the first one is going to be available or not. With Marvel United, CMON, we know that it's probably not based on their track record. Mantic, though, I don't know. Especially if these are only expansions. With Marvel United, we know that's going to be standalone. But it's also cross-compatible. This one, it sounds like you're going to be getting those 3 expansions, but is that enough that you can just play it by itself? It doesn't sound like it. Or are they going to go more of the Leader Games route with the latest Root Kickstarter, where they said, this is what we do, and if you want the base game, go get it from retail. And maybe they will. I wouldn't be surprised either way, but it'll be interesting to watch and see how that affects how much they raise. So we'll have to see, because I have to think that this is coming in April. So again, your wallet is not safe. Last but not least, and this is part duality of the game itself, but also of the source of where the crowdfunding campaign will be taking place. The next from GameFound, HEXplore, the domain of Mirza Noctis. This is launching only 2 days after Mythic Battles on April 7. This is the 4th, I believe, in the HEXplore series. This will be an interesting litmus test, again, for GameFound. We have seen ISS Vanguard, we have seen Kingdom Rush, we have now seen Robinson Crusoe, all with 3 very, very good pedigrees to base themselves off of. HEXplore is not nearly as deep in terms of its previous coffers, and does not quite have the following that those others do. Now again, I know very staunch supporters of this series, but between the 3 campaigns previously of this, none of them in total combined even raised what Kingdom Rush did with its sequel, Elemental Uprising. The last one was just under $300,000. So this puts it in sort of that tweener zone. It's not a huge project, but it's definitely not a small indie project anymore. I talked about it previously with Kingdom Rush. Robinson Crusoe has been blasted everywhere, and the marketing has been everywhere on that. It is a redo of a very, very well-known game, period. A very, very highly rated game. But I think Kingdom Rush also suffered from lack of exposure, being on GameFound as opposed to Kickstarter. Because Kickstarter still has that mass market appeal, or the mass market audience perception, or just awareness that people just go there and browse and see and sometimes happen upon things easier that GameFound does not have yet. Now, will GameFound have it? Probably, because especially when more stuff starts going there, word of mouth will spread. But I think this is a good test of something that's sort of in between, but also something that we've seen iterations of before. Again, in a 4th iteration of a game, how different is it? How new is it? How in demand is it? Or has it been oversaturated by the previous editions? Are people saying, I have enough? And that's always an interesting test. Things like Aeon's End, things like Marvel Legendary, things like Sentinels of the Multiverse, speaking of things, getting a 3rd edition. Or even one of my other favorites, Catacombs, the dexterity game. And some of those I distinctly think I have enough, and some of those I say I can't have enough. Where does this one fall for a lot of people? That will be interesting to see. Just as the game now separated from GameFound. Now, I think this is a very interesting theme. This is the horror theme, talking about the game. The world of Krasvetelia. And I like the aesthetic. I like cooperative. I like the fantasy. I like the modularity, the dice rolling, and the pressure luck. But for some reason, the concept of this game has never quite clicked with me personally. And I don't know why that is. I can't speak to any one thing saying, you know what, this just doesn't appeal to me. Because I think they do creative things. I think they do good things with this. It's just one of those that, for me personally, I just don't know. This is high on the probably try before I buy things. But it'll be interesting to see what they do with it and how they make it their own. Because they have definitely done that with the previous editions, especially the last one, The Sands of Shurax. I was impressed by that campaign. Thought it was very well done. So, regardless of place, GameFound or Kickstarter, I'd say it's a safe bet that it's going to be very similar. So let's see what happens. So I think it's something you just got to know about and be aware of and, check it out. Because I'm all for competition between Kickstarter as well. I am not just praising Kickstarter. Kickstarter has many faults, folks. GameFound does many things better, but they also are not perfect either. And so it's worth talking about the strengths and the weaknesses of both alongside the games that are on both. So that's why I'm talking about this one. There you go. So that's it. Those are the biggest ones that I think you need to know about, because also your wallet is going to take a hurting, especially if you don't realize what's coming, when it's coming, how much it's coming for, and how much you want or can spend at a time. And I just love talking about these games. I love it. It's why I have this channel. And I hope you like it too. Let's go for it, folks. 10,000 by the end of 2021. Can we do it? I don't think so personally, but why not try? As always, thanks for everything. You guys are great. You guys are very supportive. I really, honestly, genuinely, really appreciate it. Throw me a comment. I love seeing my inbox blow up on the days I post videos. You know, it's humbling that people take the time to watch and comment. So I read every single one. I try to respond to them all as well. So if you're new, or if you haven't commented before, drop one down below. Let me know what you think. Just say hi. I'm all for that too. There's a cat back there. You can kind of see its butt. I had the door open again, but I did have to pause the video at one point because he knocked over the light. But, you know, whatever. Is what it is. So, it's enough cat talk. Hey, have a great week. Stay classy out there. See you around.